As a single mother, I had been apprehensive about buying a house on my own, but I was determined to make a stable home for my daughter, Lily. After years of living in cramped apartments, I finally had the means to purchase a quaint little house nestled in a quiet neighborhood. It was an old place built in the 1920s, with hardwood floors and vintage charm. We had just moved into this aged but cozy home, and I was excited to start fresh in a new place that was ours. Lily was only 3 years old, and I wanted to give her a real sense of roots and make wonderful childhood memories here. The house needed some fixing up, but I looked forward to the project of making it our own sanctuary. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal, just like any other place we'd lived before. But then something happened that I could never forget. My sweet little Lily started acting strange. It began with little things, her suddenly refusing to play in certain rooms, or waking up from night terrors whimpering about shadowy shapes and monsters. As a rational adult, I chalked it up to her being a toddler with an overactive imagination and fear of the dark. That is, until the incident in her bedroom one afternoon. I had just tucked her in for a nap when I heard her whimpering softly. As I peered around her dimly lit room, she was staring at the corner behind her dollhouse with pure terror in her huge, innocent eyes. I felt uneasy. There was nothing but shadows filling that corner, yet Lily fixated on it as if something sinister dwelled there, unseen by me. "It's okay, sweetie," I said, pulling her close. "There's nothing there." But as I held her trembling body, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her, even if I couldn't see it myself. Since that day, Lily has often seemed scared or anxious, freezing in place as if petrified by some unknown presence lurking in the shadows of whatever room we're in. She cried herself to sleep in my arms every evening for years, while I stayed awake, worried and confused, listening for any hint of what could be causing her such distress. All I could do was comfort her and hope that whatever was frightening her so deeply was just a phase. I didn't know what could be causing these episodes, but I refused to believe there was anything sinister or supernatural at play. Still, it broke my heart to see my precious little girl so petrified. I tried everything: counseling, moving her room, even adopting an energetic puppy as a companion to lift her spirits. But the fears persisted. It wasn't until Lily was a teenager that the strange occurrences finally stopped. When I tentatively asked her about all the haunting experiences from her childhood, she just looked puzzled and said she didn't recall any of it. Perhaps it was merely an overactive childhood imagination after all that she had simply grown out of. By then, we had decided to move out of that old house and into a new place, putting that unsettling chapter of our lives behind us. Years later, while researching the history of our old neighborhood, I made a chilling discovery. The house we had lived in was built directly on top of an ancient Native American burial ground that was disturbed during its construction in the 1920s. Could angry, restless spirits tied to that sacred land have been what haunted my daughter's young mind all those years? I'll never know for sure, but I'm just grateful we got out of that place before anything truly sinister befell us. Now when I look back, I can't fully explain what haunted my little girl in those years, but I'm just grateful it passed and she can finally feel safe and at peace wherever we make our home. I'm a college student who babysits on the side to make some extra cash. I had babysat for a few families in our neighborhood before, but never for this particular family. They lived in one of the big old Victorian houses that gave the area its historical charm. When the mother called asking if I was available to watch their 2-year-old son for date night, I eagerly accepted. She mentioned he was a quiet but sweet boy. It wasn't until I arrived at their imposing dark green house that she filled me in on the rest. They seemed like a perfectly normal upper-middle-class family. The father was a lawyer while the mother came from an old money background and didn't work. But their only child, the little boy, had started acting odd lately. When I arrived that evening, the mother gave me the usual rundown, his bedtime routine, snacks he was allowed, etc. She also mentioned not to be alarmed if he spent time in the living room corner. She said with an uneasy smile before hurrying out the door with her husband. The first couple hours were uneventful. The boy ate his dinner happily while I read him a book, but after his bath, he made a beeline for that living room corner as soon as I set him down. He plopped down cross-legged, staring intently at the corner and laughing that high-pitched baby laugh. I tried entertaining him with toys and books, but he was utterly transfixed. Around 8 p.m., things took an unsettling turn. His laughs turned into murmurs like he was having a conversation with someone. I froze as I realized he seemed to be talking to someone, but there was no one else in the room. He fell silent, just smiling again at whatever he thought he saw. This continued for over an hour. Occasional mumbles from the boy, punctuated by long stretches of smiles and giggles aimed at that damn corner. I was trying my best to stay calm, but my mind raced with what could possibly be happening. An overactive imagination was one thing, but this felt different, sinister even. Finally, it was time for bed. After much coaxing and bribery with cookies, I got the boy up to his room. I tucked him in and started toward the door, expecting him to drift off to sleep. But the boy's face then split into a huge grin as he seemed to be addressing some unseen entity. When the parents returned home, I told them with a forced smile that their son seemed perfectly cheerful the whole evening. The mother's face fell as she replied, "That's the thing. He only started acting that way after his uncle passed away just recently, almost like he thinks his uncle is still here playing with him." They were incredibly close. His uncle would come over all the time to play games and read stories with him. It's almost like the boy thinks his uncle is still here, playing with him like they always did before the accident. She choked back tears, mourning both her brother and her son's innocence lost. I felt my blood run cold. The thought of this sweet little boy somehow seeing and interacting with the spirit of his beloved uncle who tragically died too soon frightened me to my core. I forced another sickly smile and quickly made my exit, resolving to never accept another babysitting job from that family again. Whatever was happening there was far beyond an overactive imagination. But over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about that strange night and the boy's unshakable bond with his uncle. When the mother called me again, desperately seeking a sitter, I surprised myself by agreeing despite my previous unease. Perhaps this was something I needed to try and understand better. On my return to their Victorian home, the boy's face lit up in a wide smile when he saw me, seeming to immediately remember me. As before, he quickly became absorbed in his imaginary playtime in the living room corner after dinner. But this time I didn't fight it or try to distract him. I simply observed, watching him giggle and babble with pure childlike delight. Anxiety slowly gave way to calm acceptance over the course of the evening. There was no menacing presence here, only a young boy's love for the most important person in his life, refusing to die after that person was gone from this world. If his uncle's spirit provided that comfort and joy, who was I to disrupt it? When the parents arrived home, the mother looked drained but thankful that I didn't seem disturbed this time. "You have such a special little guy," I told her with a genuine smile. "His playmate may be imaginary to us, but it's real to him, and that's all that matters." From then on, I became their regular weekend babysitter. The boy and I formed our own bond, with me keeping him company in that living room corner, almost as if I could perceive his unseen playmate through his laughs of pure, unbridled happiness. It became something I looked forward to, this window into a child's powerful, magical thinking. There are some mysteries that are better left unexplained instead of being filled with fear or doubt. This all happened years ago. It started innocently enough when Emma was just a few months old. She would seem transfixed by something in her room, those big blue eyes locked onto a spot across from her crib. She'd coo and giggle as if someone was playing peekaboo with her. At first I thought maybe there was a toy or pattern on the curtains catching her attention, but then her behavior grew more unsettling. She started having full-blown conversations, babbling back and forth as if another voice was responding to her baby talk. When I'd enter the room, she'd look towards that area and let out a gleeful squeal, like she was greeting someone. My blood would run cold. I questioned whether I was going crazy, seeing things that weren't there because of sleep deprivation. But my husband noticed it too. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Emma's babbles would echo through the baby monitor. We'd rush in to find her wiggling happily, gesturing at seemingly nothing in her room. As she grew older, the imaginary friend became more corporeal. She gave it a name, Sasha, and described it as a little girl around her age with long black hair. Emma started setting places for Sasha at the kitchen table, plating food for her invisible guest. But Sasha didn't seem so imaginary anymore. Cabinet doors started unlatching on their own. Toys would go missing only to reappear in impossible places. And sometimes I'd see Emma watching that spot in her room again, her face frozen in fear rather than delight. I became consumed with dread, wondering what sort of force had manifested this unseen entity. Was it a violent spirit haunting our home? A demon preying on her innocence? The thought of some evil slinking around my child made me physically ill. As Emma grew from a baby into a young girl, the strange occurrences slowly faded. Her conversations with Sasha became less frequent, until I stopped seeing her gesture towards that spot in her room altogether. The imaginary friend she had been so convinced was real seemed to simply dissipate over time, until it was like Sasha had never existed at all. But I could never shake the uncertainty of whether Sasha was just a figment of her childhood imagination, or something more sinister that had once loomed around my daughter in that house's shadowy corners. I will never forget what happened with Emma's imaginary friend Sasha. Even years later, I still get chills thinking about it. The memories are burned into my mind. The dread I felt, the strange things happening with no explanation, the scary thought that something evil was messing with my little girl. I can't unsee the fear on Emma's face when she looked at that spot in her room. Though the episodes eventually stopped, I'll never forget that time when I couldn't protect her from whatever unseen thing had taken an interest in her. Not knowing what Sasha really was will haunt me forever. It's an experience I can never fully let go of. Despite all the disturbing events surrounding Sasha, I'm eternally grateful that Emma grew up to be a healthy, normal young woman with no lingering effects from her bizarre imaginary friend. Seeing her now, happy and well-adjusted, brings me incredible relief and joy after those terrifying years of uncertainty about what Sasha's presence meant. Emma thrived, and that nightmare is fully behind us, for which I'll always be thankful.